we are going to be talking about getting cities moving, unlocking the power of transport to boost regional growth. We'll be hearing from Kate Willard, who chairs the Thames Estuary Partnership and was recently appointed as a commissioner by the National Infrastructure Commission. Kate's going to talk to you about unlocking the power of transport, as I said, to boost regional growth. Please welcome Kate Willard.
So I'm Kate Willard. I'm a National Infrastructure Commissioner. But I thought it was also worth mentioning that in real life, not that the Commission is not real life, but in real life, I have built airports and laid a bit of rail tracks. So I sort of vaguely, hopefully, know what I'm talking about. And also just to mention that the lens that I'm using for my presentation this morning is the lens of economic growth. Good, green, fair economic growth. The National Infrastructure Commission's remit, its first remit, is to support the sustainable economic growth across all regions of the UK. So it's the growth agenda that I'm going to be focusing on this morning. So here we go. As the Commission has set out in our latest National Infrastructure Assessment, which was published last October, we need to improve our national road and rail networks to better connect cities and support trade in both goods and in services. And at an urban level, we need to help cities reach their productivity potential by enhancing their transport systems. Crucially, there's not a choice between intra-city and intercity. We need both, and we need to improve both at the same time. And that's why, I'll be honest, I find it slightly ironic to be stood here in the very same building where 5 months ago, the Prime Minister ditched the Integrated Rail Plan. Now, it was imperfect, but it represented a coherent attempt to address the connectivity and capacity issues facing the North and the Midlands. We now have a collection of schemes, many of which have value in their own terms, but it's unclear how they're going to fit together to match our scale of the strategic challenge we face in connecting some of our largest cities and regions to each other and the towns in between. But let me stay positive. Our great cities are the key to unlocking economic growth for their wider regions. They have the highest employment density and the largest concentrations of productive businesses. We have the potential to reverse the current situation where large English cities outside of London are less productive than their comparable peers in other countries. And we have the potential to improve the quality of life by making it easier to access services, retail and leisure activities. Now, of course, travel demand patterns have changed following the COVID-19 pandemic, but this has not weakened the case for long-term investment. Getting cities moving means better public transport and more safer active travel. Although we may return to active travel, I'm guessing on the panel later, with approximately 25% of the population having a disability or being disabled, we need to think about what that lens looks like for active travel. Specifically, the Commission's recent National Infrastructure Assessment made the case for government to invest £22 billion to enable a step change in public transport in the largest cities outside of London. I don't use many slides, but I'm hoping somebody's going to put a slide up there. Bam! This one packs a punch. These 4 cities need no introduction to you. Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds and Manchester, important economic hubs within their wider regions, but also face the biggest future capacity constraints. This chart shows the kind of shortfall in public transport capacity over the longer term, given these cities' anticipated employment growth, even if working from home remains established. The different colours show different scenarios, explained in full in our assessment. I keep plugging that, don't I? But the light blue and mauve colours, the second and third bars for each city, represents what we consider to be a reasonable central scenario. So just to spell this out, as it stands, Birmingham could have 20,000 more people wanting to travel into the city during the midweek peak by 2050 than it does today, 20,000. So we have to get moving on mass transit solutions to address this. And the Commission says these 4 places should be the initial priorities for investment in mass transit systems. We think around 2/3 of the total 22 billion should be dedicated to these places. the remaining third available to other cities and towns with viable plans that would shift the dial on the local economy. We need to avoid jam spreading, but we do think there may well be a case to expand the reach of public transport networks in places like Liverpool and Sheffield, where current networks are smaller than the average for comparably sized European cities. We also think there is a case for investment in capacity in fast-growing smaller cities, including Coventry and Norwich. Now, that slide can come down now, thank you very much. Core government funding can get us so far, but as cities will be the primary beneficiaries of better public transport, it's reasonable that they should contribute to the costs. We think this means giving cities the economy to fund as well as find local infrastructure solutions. Although I'm conscious there's a bit of a dichotomy in that one, isn't there? Funding isn't always attractive, but finding sometimes is. The Commission does not have a view on the best form of fiscal devolution. It would need to be approached with care, especially to avoid any unintended consequences between different city regions. But as we all know, tried and tested ways to increase fiscal devolution include business rate relief, business rate retention, or land value capture. Indeed, many combined authorities already have the power to do some of these. But wherever the money comes from, the reality is that investment in public transport alone will not be sufficient to reduce congestion and improve capacity. Once it's in place as a viable alternative to private car travel, cities will need to reduce car journeys into city centres, especially at peak times. Measures such as congestion charging and workplace parking levels reduce car use, thereby freeing up room on the roads for more public transport and active travel. They also, of course, can provide a revenue stream. Our analysis suggests a cordon-based congestion charge or workplace parking levy could raise around 10 to 15 million pounds a year in the largest English cities. But an important principle for any such scheme is that the cash raised is ring-fenced and visibly spent on further public transport, cycle lanes, and walking infrastructure improvements. Public research we undertook showed that support for charging measures increased when people understood that the revenues raised would be spent on improvements to local transport. This is obviously a politically charged subject, like proper politically charged subject, but the Commission's job is to give candid advice. You don't unlock economic growth by clogging up cities. In our view, it's reasonable to place some practical limits on access to road space by private cars, where the alternative is significantly worse congestion, as long as the system is fair and as long as the public transport alternatives are there. I'm just going to repeat that. As long as the system is fair and as long as the public transport alternatives are there. The fairness point is key here. The exact form of any demand management measures should be a decision made by individual cities who are best placed to understand their own context. This includes considering who will be most affected by any charging scheme. There's a couple of facts in tension here. The households that are most likely to be affected by any charging scheme are those from higher income groups, because they tend to travel more frequently. However, less well-off households who rely on car for most journeys will still be negatively impacted, and certain ethnic groups are disproportionately represented in lower income groups. So clearly, cities will have to consider carefully the impact of any new scheme and look at mitigating actions, including targeted exemptions on public transport or public transport subsidies. So, in the classic kind of good news, bad news, I think it was bad news, good news, let's conclude with something that I think we're all going to find a common bond with. And that's the importance of shifting transport funding from Whitehall to City Hall, or County Hall, or your hall. To be fair, government have taken some welcome steps on this. We say that the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlements model should be extended beyond the mayoral combined authorities to all local strategic transport authorities, and the Trailblazer deals granted to Greater Manchester and West Midlands rolled out to all mayoral combined authorities as soon as possible. Local transport authorities need the freedom to identify local priorities and opportunities and have proper control of medium-term resources to address them. That means an end to a reliance on competitive bidding rounds and all the perverse consequences of that model. It means stable funding cycles around which mayors and their teams can plan maintenance, renewals, and smaller enhancement projects in a way that's properly integrated with that wider growth and regeneration agenda. And incidentally, before anyone thinks I've forgotten the South East, as the Thames Estuary Envoy and Chair of the Thames Estuary Growth Board, government appointed, let me say that the Commission has been categorical that London also requires a long-term funding settlement. The recent succession of short-term funding deals for Transport for London must be replaced with longer-term capital settlements that similarly help the capital plan for more housing and economic growth. If we devolve core funding to cities, and if we involve civic partners in the development and funding of enhancement schemes, we can evolve the economic futures of their communities. But colleagues, this must be done fairly. Thank you very much.